All join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. So there's a kind of this funny thing I noticed with Buddhist practice is it gets kind of introduced into new cultures, and specifically here into this culture, where often, especially for those who are new to Buddhism, think that being around Buddhism or learning about Buddhism or doing meditation means that you have to like be something else or become someone else. And everything I've learned through Buddhist practice is really the opposite of that. It's actually learning to just be fully who you are and not hiding behind different masks and ideas and labels. You know, I am Buddhist meaning something is as much of a label as anything else. And so really this practice is about recognizing who you are and learning to be kind. Recognizing who you are and learning to be generous. Recognizing who you are and learning to be forgiving. So it's just coming back to the nature of who you are. And who you are is very different from who you think you are. Meaning that we have built this identity, this ego, that gives us a sense of pride, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And often we then fall into playing that role. You know, I am this, I am that. They are this to me, they are that to me. And it's really challenging to just wake up and say, this is who I am. Going beyond this idea of thinking that we're separate and different from others. And at the true nature, we're just human beings who breathe. And that's it. And when we encounter people, if we can recognize that they too are simply human beings that breathe, then maybe we'll treat them better. Maybe we'll treat ourselves better. But that's difficult. And you know, I touch on this every so often, especially for those, because I know there's probably a handful of people here that, you know, this is day one of Buddhist practice and you don't know anything about it. And you think it's something that lived a long time ago in some other country, far, far away, and filled with people who looked different, right? All of that is true. But all they were humans who breathe. So don't forget to come back to simplifying this practice. And if you are new, that learning about Buddhism or bringing Buddhist practice into your life doesn't mean that you have to become something or someone else. Just learn to be true to yourselves and work on that. learning to be kind and compassionate, and all the kind of key buzzwords, patient, that you hear throughout Buddhism or that you read in every Buddhist text out there. So with that, how many of you are here maybe for the first time? So welcome. Glad you're here. We'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who are maybe here for the first time or sitting for the first time, nothing's going to happen to you, most likely. You're not going to float away. Anyone's mind race all day long, just thinking and thinking and thinking, doesn't shut off. That was quick. I didn't even finish the first question, I guess. Your mind will not shut off. It will not stop racing. It's going to continue to wander and jump. Every time it does, recognize it. I'll say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep or simply remind you that you're lost in thought and bring it back to present moment. Don't judge your practice. Don't ask yourself, is this working? Is this not working? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds. People move. People cough. Phones ring. This is life, right? Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. The shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you're on the chairs, also just trying to sit up straight. You want to be comfortable, but also don't get lazy with posture. Try to stay upright. Try to be mindful of posture as you potentially hunch over and start to fall asleep. Not that anyone would do that, of course. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. We'll be done in about 3 hours. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of breath. Knowing throughout the practice you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we breathe. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment, just sitting, breathing. With the body still, rested, the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize how you feel now. It's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind. Whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. There's a human being no different than anyone in this room who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for every one of us in this room, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole lives are filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because most of us don't respond to too many things this way. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape as often people think it is. Meditation is becoming aware of the present moment and learning to be with the present moment. And often the present moment is not fun. It's not happy. It's not peaceful. But it is the present moment. And learning to be with that takes practice. We spend so much of our time trying to run away from things, discomfort, dissatisfaction, angst. This is the essence of the Buddha's teachings. We recognize the discomfort, the aversions we have in our lives, and then we try to run from them. So we look for something to run to. And therefore we constantly crave and desire for things to be different from how they are. Which is funny because the present moment is impossible to be different from how it is. You might want the future moments to be different, but then when you get to those future moments, that's the present moment, and you want that present moment to be different. The present moment is only the present moment. And we spend so much time trying to change, control, fix, manipulate people and places and things around us. And we struggle quite a bit. This practice is letting go of that and learning to gain control over your reaction to the world around us. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's ultimately sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody around you. And that's it. Starts with learning to get quiet. challenge with getting quiet is when you're quiet for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, what are you stuck with? Yourselves. I mean, I'm sure you're all great, no offense. Right? What do we often try to run away from? Ourselves. So the same mind that drives us crazy is the mind that this crazy Buddhist practice is saying you should learn to sit with. Well, that sounds ridiculous. Why would I want to sit with the thing that's causing me so much suffering? Well, that's the practice. Because like it or not, that mind that's driving you crazy, you're stuck with it. So, good luck. Have fun. I'd rather just stop there, open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and I can address that. We'll go from there. Yes, Cynthia.
I was feeling a little bit bad because I was running later than 11 o'clock, and then I kind of realized that being late to mindfulness meditation is sort of like an oxymoron, double trip. And I got here and I sat, and what you just said reminded me of it. About 5 years ago or so, I was on my way to meditation out at college. And as I was coming up to college, I was detoured and detoured and detoured. And I'm deep into La Mesa, then deep into Oak Park, and trying to get back to Buddha for You, do meditation. I get there, and me and several other of us are running in, trying to get there on time. And we sit and we meditate, and all of us are kind of, we made it. And after we all meditated, you said, so how about that traffic? And everybody that was terrible. I couldn't get here, and they were pushing me this way and that way, and it was a Columbus Day parade, and they were moving us this way, and we all kind of lamented our situation. And you said, can I ask a question? Did anybody stop and watch the parade? And we all kind of
Yeah.
And that just brought me to, as I was driving here, don't get in my way, I've got to get to meditation. Wait a second. So first of all, thank you so much for that teaching of many years ago, because it comes to mind every so often.
Yeah.
And just love it.
Yeah, that was it was the Boo Parade, they call it, the Halloween parade on Elkhorn Boulevard that every year. It's one of my favorites because it creates an incredible moment of practice to where people either gave up and turned and went home, or made themselves miserable just trying to get to meditation. And I just kind of wasted 20 minutes of time getting through the meditation to eventually say to people, did you even stop to watch the parade? And that's life. Everybody's in our way. Constantly. And that I'm careful especially when I share this with like college kids, because what I'm about to say doesn't mean we should just be lazy and not pay attention to time, because in some regards it matters, in the sense that we have responsibilities and to be respectful of certain things. So what I'm about to say, keep that in mind also. Time is a complete illusion. You weren't late, we just started early, right? You were here when you were here, and we were here when we were here. But because we set these constructs of time, we build our entire life around that. And then we think we're early, we're late, or we're on time. And we use that same thing for judgment of people. I like them, I don't like them. Places, I like this place, I don't like this place, right? We constantly set some construct and parameters around likes and dislikes, wants and not wants, and then our world operates from that lens. And the idea behind stopping and watching the parade really is a metaphor. Well, literally, yeah, stop and watch that parade because it's kind of fun, but it's also just a metaphor for life, that we're too busy thinking everyone's in our way, and actually just paying attention to what's going on around us is maybe a better way. You know, if you've ever been stuck in traffic and you're really angry that you're stuck in traffic, does your anger about being stuck in traffic change the traffic? You know, your anger doesn't mean that everybody's just going to get up, oh, they're angry. You know, I'm going to move out of their way so they can get through their traffic, you know. So a lot of that is kind of letting go of the constructs and ideas that we've set up for ourselves and how we want the world to be. So again, with balancing that with, you know, time. Yeah, Jim.
I just like to say about traffic. One thing I learned here was when I'm angry in traffic, that I'm part of it.
Yeah, you're in somebody else's way. Somebody else is really angry at you because you're in their way. You know, it's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I have found that no matter how late I am, I always get to where I'm going at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. And that's why I said it's a balance because, you know, like when I introduce this to college kids, if we start at 7, show them at 7, right? There's an importance in understanding why we're late to things, right? If we're late because there are things out of our control, then it's out of our control, right? If we're late because we were just being lazy and sitting around, you know, doing nothing for 30 minutes and then decided to take our sweet time and get up and move, and we're expecting others to wait for us, then we should probably look at that also. So there's a balance there with time. Yeah.
One of the basic tenets of Buddhism is not harming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not killing. So why is it okay, like to pull weeds
Mm-hmm.
outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a hard time like justifying or
Yeah,
like putting that all together. You know?
sure.
Like last year, there was someone in here sharing about killing ants in their house. So I found a great, like cinnamon sticks. I put cinnamon sticks, instead of killing the ants, I put cinnamon sticks where they were coming in, and we have not had a problem with ants
Right.
since then. So that was great, and I felt much better about that. When there's a spider in the house, I take it outside, I don't kill it. And so I'm trying to practice all these things or change my behavior so I'm not harming things. But even things like taking down cobwebs.
Right.
That's harming another life form's
Yeah,
home.
someone's home.
So how does that fit in?
Yeah, back to the weeds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple things just to touch on it, and then I'll. I want to start with the first way that you asked that question, and this is for everybody as you begin to learn about Buddhism. The way you started that question was, why is it okay? Okay, and so I think it's important that when we learn about Buddhist practice and what Buddha taught, if we get wrapped up so much in the Buddha said this, so that means it's okay, or the Buddha didn't say this, so that means it's not okay, we kind of walk into an area that we're, it's a little dangerous to have that perception. I'm just saying this in general, not to you specifically, mainly for those who are brand new, right? The Buddha was just a human. That's all he was, right? And he was a pretty wise human, but he was a human sharing his thoughts and ways of living a simple, peaceful life, which included not harming, right? It's one of the basic, what's called the 5 precepts, for those who don't know. And the idea behind the 5 precepts is the first 5, no lying, no killing, no stealing. The killing is the no harming one. No lying, no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, and no intoxicants or anything that alters a state of mind. And the idea is that these precepts are put in place to create a harmonious sangha, a harmonious community, so people can live together and work on ending suffering for themselves and for others. And with that in mind, it wasn't like the Buddha sat down and said, here's 250 precepts you must all follow, right? He looked at things that happened in the community that caused harm or were hindering people from overcoming their sense of suffering. And so precepts were kind of rolled out in that fashion. I've always looked at precepts as things that, they're like red lights. You could run every red light in the world. You don't have to stop. We choose to stop because we don't want to harm people. We don't want to get a ticket, right? I'm sure someone in here has run a red light before and probably gotten away with it. And that means you also got there quicker, right? So the precepts are there to guide us, but we make a choice as how or what we want to follow. Specifically to the weeds, the question, my knowledge and teaching of Buddhism is that the Buddha talked about, and of course this can be debated, as it should, the Buddha talked about anything that has consciousness, right? And so it was any sentient being. Again, I'm looking at very technical teachings that I've learned, which is any sentient being that has consciousness, that has the ability to awaken. And that would be anything such as the insects or the animals, the bugs, things like that, the humans, obviously. And the idea is that plants do not have Buddha nature, that they cannot awaken from being a plant. The consciousness doesn't have the karmic seeds to become an awakened being. Like I said, research, study, don't debate me because I got nothing else to say to that. I mean, you can debate me, but I can't defend that, right? That's all I got, you know, is that that's the teaching. And, you know, I'm aware, as many are, of, you know, studies that, you know, when you harm plants and, you know, you move them, that they shrivel and they move. And so all of that kind of stuff. So my suggestion is, if you're an individual in this room who doesn't like killing plants, then don't kill plants. It's really that simple, you know? That's to me the most practical way to live life around looking at Buddhist teachings. The danger is that we fall into these categories of, well, this is what the Buddha said, so I must do this. And then we think, well, I'm a terrible Buddhist. I'm failing at this Buddhist thing, so I give up. And then we go out and get drunk and harm people and kill others, right? All because we hated ourselves because we were tearing out weeds.
The perception, you know, the work that's behind you are, most people consider it absolutely beautiful, but
Right.
it's our perception. Why is that's just as beautiful as a weed growing in the crack?
Totally, totally. It is all up to our own individual perception, everything. And that's all we have. I think the important part to understand is that, and this came up a couple times recently, is that the expression I love in Buddhism is that the unenlightened mind cannot comprehend what are considered enlightened teachings. So the challenge is we sit here, well, I sit here with an unenlightened mind, right? As a greedy, angry, ignorant human being. And I look at the teachings of the Buddha and I think they're the wisest things I've ever seen, but I can't comprehend them because I'm just a greedy, angry human. So how am I really going to embody this? Because all I'm using is this unenlightened mind to try to comprehend what someone 2,500 years ago was talking about. So I look at my own personal intention, my own personal effort. That's all one can do, you know? Go ahead here and then, yeah, hang on, Jim, go ahead.
Okay. Just a reflection about that question. So one of my favorite stories out of one of the books on the precepts about do not kill, I think it's Lori, talks about driving down the road one night and he hit a raccoon. And he's pulled over and he stopped and the raccoon was alive but badly injured. And he said, I didn't have the courage to kill it, so I got back in the car and drove away. And he said it was just, you know, he felt terrible about it later because the right thing to do in that situation would have been to put the raccoon out of his misery. So the precept do not kill is non-dogmatic. It's discernment, like discerning how do I understand the precept in this particular matrix of conditions. But I just like that story.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story that, yeah, John Dada Laurie's teachings are wonderful. And I think that it's a great example of recognizing how we look at precepts or anything we learn from, you know, Buddhist teachings. The ones that always fascinate me is when we look at things like, you know, the killing of weeds, when we look at things like, you know, debating whether or not, you know, certain drugs or alcohol are healthy for you or things like that. So, and this is in reference to your question, but the thing I love about the precepts is that often people get so wrapped up in these things. Is it okay to use this or not use this? But we don't ask ourselves, is it okay to be mean to people? Right? We're just mean to people, but we want to debate whether or not it's okay to smoke marijuana. So the precepts really bring things up in you that will make you really uncomfortable, because they do what I think is most important, which is it forces us to look at every single one of our actions and our behaviors. And I think that that's really a beautiful path and a beautiful practice to look at what is the intention behind every action that I am taking. And is it filled with greed? Is it filled with anger? Is it filled with ignorance? Or is it filled with generosity, compassion, and wisdom? And each of us is on our own to make those choices. Yeah, Jim.
I was just trying to say that the thing about going back to plants is you can, if I were to go out there and snap the orchids in half wantonly just to be mean, my intention is what is wrong. But if I go up there to prune them because they need to be pruned, then my intention is something else. And the same thing with weeds. If I just go stomping through someone's garden and wrecking plants, my intention is all off. But if I'm out there to clear things and to make things better and to help other things, then I have another intention.
Yeah. Oh, our intentions. Yeah. And the danger is, what do we think about our intentions?
I know.
We think we're right. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a question. I'm going back to the time being an illusion and a mental construct, and that was helpful to hear. And I'm wondering if you could say the same thing about money, and if you have thoughts on how kind of this practice can help change our relationship with that.
Everything is an illusion. I recommend reading the Diamond Sutra. It's an incredible Buddhist teachings. Everything is like a dream, a bubble, an illusion. Money, the cushion you're sitting on, the orchids, the weeds, time, right? All you'd have to do is listen to some Alan Watts for a little while, and that will help. You know, I'll give you a few things, but just YouTube Alan Watts for a while, and that'll help. Yeah, I mean, our relationship to money is really no different than our relationship to anything else, right? Often people think that Buddhism is about, I know I did early on when I got into this initially, you know, I went from a life of having a lot of money to having no money because I thought, well, I'm going to be a Buddhist now, so I got to get rid of everything I own. I sure wish I kept all that money, you know, because I could have paid for a lot of Dharma Bum temples, right? But I didn't. I thought that I had to get rid of it. But the problem for me as a practitioner, specifically to that question, was how I was making it. I mean, I wasn't like harming people. It wasn't like murdering people. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't a butcher. But I was doing things that, to me as a consultant, weren't fulfilling. It was wasting my time, right? I didn't enjoy it. It brought me no happiness whatsoever. It felt like a complete waste of my life. The only thing it brought me was a lot of money. And then with a lot of money, I did what? I bought a lot of stuff because I had to try to justify, well, I hate what I'm doing, but as long as I got all this stuff, then I'm okay. Well, and everybody else is trying to get a lot of stuff, so I'm okay, right? I mean, it's the Kerouac and kind of the nature of the Dharma Bums, work, produce, consume, work, produce, consume. Everything we want, we buy it, we don't like it, we throw it away, and we get a new one, right? And so the challenge with right livelihood, which is part of the Eightfold Path, and you can explore that as well, back to the money, is it's not that there's anything wrong with making the money. How do we make it? What do we do with it? And how do we feel if we don't have it, right? So if you have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of money, ultimately the real attachment here isn't to the money, it's to the sense of self. And again, this relates to everything. It's our pride, it's our ego, it's the construct, just like you asked about time, that we have set for ourselves and say, if I do this, and I have this profession, and I make this money, and I buy these things, then I am successful. This is America, right? Most of us were not raised to go out and just, you know, get C's through school and be happy helping people. That's not usually what's taught when we're in second grade, right? I hope someday that changes, but that's not where it's at. So of course we get to a place where we're so trapped, and it is really difficult to unplug, because if you unplug from, you know, my first master teacher, Venerable Ijur, she said, Jeff, and this was in 2003, she said, Jeff, you work so hard, you make so much money, to buy so many things. If you didn't have so many things, you wouldn't need so much money, you wouldn't have to work so hard. She told me that 16 years ago, and it drastically changed my life. And it's the one teaching I got that I swear has me sitting here right now, doing what I do. I work probably 1,000 times harder than I did, but how do I feel about it? It's like night and day, you know? The money gives us this illusion of safety, comfort, security. And there are things that, you know, that as we age and, you know, making sure we're taken care of and health-wise and things like that. So I'm not saying just go get rid of all your money and, you know, start begging, because probably wouldn't survive. But do we need all the stuff that we have? Probably not. And so each person can find that middle path and that balance. But if it's a recurring theme that's been going on for you for a very long time, then unfortunately the one thing it requires is to just pull the plug and make a drastic change and recognize that you can probably survive with very little. But it's scary because those things that we're holding on to, they are that ego, that pride, that identity that we have built. And a lot of that is driven by the money. So, you know, if I had $1 million, I could feed $1 million worth of food to people who are starving, you know? So, yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alan Watts, right livelihood, those two things.
It's that whole fear and insecurity and illusion of security thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it comes back to the greatest illusion, which is the sense of self. And for those who are brand new to Buddhism, it doesn't mean that you don't exist. I mean, you are here, right? You are alive, you are breathing. But you're very different from how you perceive yourself to be. And we have this illusion that we are the most important things in the world and that we must, you know, we spend so much time worried about what we look like and, you know, all these kinds of things, you know. I mean, the Buddha, the first thing he did when he, well, maybe not the first thing, but one of the first things he did when he left the palace as the prince, what did he do? He took his beautiful, long, princely hair that was a sign of his wealth and his status as a prince and cut it. He took off all his, you know, princely robes and he patched together from bits and pieces of cloth and he made a robe. Those two things right there show the overcoming of that sense of the attachment to the ego of being the prince with all the wealth and all the money. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
3 kinds of suffering. Can you elaborate on the third, suffering, the conditionality?
Suffering, but
Make a lot of sense. I mean, suffering from mental pain, physical pain, easy, and then suffering from change. But the third one, I'm having a hard time understanding.
suffering from conditionality,
Mhm.
meaning our inability to accept conditions as they are.
Is that what it?
Well, you tell me what you read. I mean, yeah, you read that somewhere.
Yeah.
Tibetan?
I'm not sure. I was just kind of glancing through it. It's just
Yeah.
a couple, and I noticed that they broke it down to 3. And I just like the first 2 made sense. The third one was kind of a lot more vague.
Yes. So I'll give you, I have no idea if this even addresses your question,
That's fine.
but maybe it'll be helpful. One thing, again, also for those who are new to Buddhism, when we pick up a book and we start reading something and we see some person or some scholar or some teacher that breaks things down into 2s or 3s or 5s or 10s or 12s or 20s, it's one interpretation of something, right? And it doesn't mean it's not beneficial or useful, but I would continue to explore what that was specifically and you know, look at what they're referencing. The word conditioning is, you know, very common in Buddhist teachings, is that everything, karma, the law of cause and effect is karma. Karma means action. And everything is conditioned behavior, right? I mean, the only reason that you're sitting there right now on that chair is because an individual named Robert Frank bought those chairs like 8 years ago. You have no idea who he is. You'll never meet him, most likely. He means nothing to you. You mean nothing to him, but you're on the chair that he purchased. So he is equally as important as you are, or you'd be sitting on the floor, right? Causes and conditions. We don't understand the chain of karma, right? We don't understand. We just pick things up and we think, I'm going to use this. But we don't necessarily understand where it comes from, what experiences it has. And so when I look at causes and conditions and you relate it to people specifically, right? You ever been angry at someone?
Of course.
Right? And when you feel that anger, what do you think about them?
Not good thoughts.
Not good thoughts, right? Are they terrible people?
In the moment they are.
In the moment, thank God. I appreciate your honesty. For those who didn't hear, in the moment, they are terrible people. Right? And what do you think they think about you?
Probably the same.
Probably, not probably, definitely the same. Unless they went to their Buddhist class and they learned that they're not terrible people, you're not a terrible person. You're just in that moment, or they are in that moment, really angry. And they're coming from a place of pain and suffering. And all we encounter is that kind of intimate face-to-face reaction, whether it's someone we know or don't know, where the person who cuts you off, the person who's angry at you, the person who served your latte the wrong way, the person who brought your food out late, they're terrible people. And we assume that they're just the most miserable human beings. We don't know anything about them. We don't know what their day was like. We don't know who maybe they lost recently in their lives. We don't know what they were like when they were 5 years old being raised. We don't know anything about them, just like you don't know anything about the chair. But here you are, and that chair is giving you, unless you're not comfortable, the chair is giving you a comfortable place to sit, right? So you're using it in that moment without knowing the history of it. We do this with people constantly. And that causes us so much suffering because we just interact with people in that moment. And if we open the mind, we open the heart to understand that every human being has gone through their own crazy experiences. Fortunately, we're out of time, but if I sat here and I rattled off all the things I've done in my life, you would never come back. So on that, we'll close, because we're out of time, so it's another class for another day, I guess. But definitely look up specifically, and you can even bring it to me, show me, and we can look at, because I just said that based on a few words you said, but I'm really not familiar with exactly what you're talking about, so I'd love to see it. And then we can maybe dive into something in a completely different direction. Yeah, sounds good. Okay. We'll join palms. For the benefit of this practice, be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Annie's mother during her time of rebirth, and to Annie and her family and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering.